So just like everybody else, I have been addicted to Marvel Rivals, which is a 6v6 hero shooter that takes inspiration from the game Overwatch. Each character in the game is placed within one of three categories. First, you have your Duelist or your DPS that deal a lot of damage. Second, you have your Vanguards that can take a lot of damage and also block damage for your teammates. And third, you have your Strategists or your healers that can heal your team or provide them some stat boosts. But this got me thinking, and the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise also divides its characters into one of three groups, that being speed, flight, or power. So in today's video, I'm going to be reimagining Marvel Rivals if it was just a Sonic game. I'll be talking about the roster, as well as how we can adapt Sonic elements into our Marvel Rivals game, and of course, talking about all of the characters' abilities. This week will strictly be about the Duelists. Next week I'll have the Strategist video out, and the week after that I'll have the Vanguard video out. If you want to skip to the character abilities, you can skip to the chapter titled Abilities. I'll be going over all the Duelists, what I think their kits could look like, as well as their team up and passive abilities, and their ultimates, as well as giving them an MVP screen. So without further ado, let's get into the video. This is Marvel Rivals if it was Sonic Rivals. Yeah, I'm gonna get copyrighted. So to start off the video, let's talk about the roster. Marvel Rivals launched with 33 characters to play, so I'm going to challenge myself to try to come up with kits for 33 characters from the Sonic franchise. Obviously, you'll have Sonic and all his main protagonists and antagonists. So far, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Shadow, Omega, Rouge, Amy, Big, Cream, Vector, Espio, Charmy, Dr. Eggman, Metal Sonic, Silver, and Blaze. That's already 16 characters off rip, so we'll need 17 more. I think that all the supporting characters that have made a name for themselves in the Sonic series should also be included, which includes the likes of Fang, Ray, Mighty, Bark, Bean, Emerl, Styx, Jet, Tikal, and Chaos. The reason I didn't include the other Babylon Rogues is because we want to leave room for some other representation. But maybe I'll make a part 4 where I go over some DLC characters. So that's 10 more characters, so we need 7 more. The Sonic franchise has been on a streak of inclusion of the IDW comic characters, so you already know the best ones are going into the rosters, which is the likes of Tangle, Whisper, and Surge. Now the last 4 slots I believe should be reserved for some of the most iconic villains in the series. The villains that I want to include are Zavok, Infinite, Sage, and Mephiles. Sorry if there was a character that you wanted to see that didn't make the list, but if there was, comment below that character, and maybe I'll make a part 4 of all the DLC options. Now that we have our cast, it's time to see how the Sonic franchise can encode its DNA into a Marvel Rivals styled hero shooter. Firstly, let's go over the stage design. In Marvel Rivals, you generally have 2 types of gameplay styles. One is to escort a moving vehicle to get it to its destination, and the other is to capture a point. Both of these gameplay styles work within the game that I'm imagining, and I don't see a purpose in changing them. However, I do think a third could be added where you have to get to the end of a level in a certain amount of time. Imagine a linear level where along the way there are mini capture points that serve as checkpoints, to where if you capture it, you unlock the next section of the stage. It's essentially Convoy, only you are the payload. At the end of each gameplay style, in classic Sonic fashion, you are given a rank based on your performance, ranging from C to S, which gives it a more Sonic feel. And speaking of a more Sonic feel, this game has unlimited options for which stages could be represented. Ideally, stages that have not been represented in Sonic or Shadow Generations could make an appearance. I made 2 whole videos on how I would restage Sonic and Shadow Generations, so if you're interested, the title card will be somewhere on the screen, but by all means stick around for this video. In any case, we should also include stage elements from Sonic games to be included in our level designs. These elements include dash and launch panels that can increase mobility for a short time, dash rings or rainbow rings that can get you to the point faster, cannons that can launch you straight to the point, springs that can launch you upwards to get to higher areas, and hell, let's even throw in some loot-de-loots for spectacle's sake. All of these elements would ensure that this game really feels like a Sonic game and not just a complete ripoff. This next quick section is for Sega if you're watching, because I know you want to monetize this. Players can buy different skins for their favorite characters with rings that they can purchase with real money. However, in-game you can earn emblems that can be used to purchase free cosmetics, lore, artwork, etc. Since this would hypothetically be a live service game, I can see different seasons being based on the eras of Sonic, where one season could be based on Sonic and the Secret Rings, and all the characters get genie-inspired skin options. Now that we've covered currency, let's get into the final topic before we get into the character abilities. Health and Shield is a gameplay mechanic in Marvel Rivals that can be tweaked for even more Sonic DNA to be injected in. Yeah, that's a poor choice of words. I'm giving the fanfic artists ideas. Health packs in Marvel Rivals are shown as these floating green icons that, quite frankly, are pretty boring. So to change this, we can make the health pack into ring item boxes that come in 5, 10, or 20 rings, randomly cycling through. Rings would effectively manifest themselves as the health in the game, and having combos of 5, 10, and 20 rings gives a bit more strategy to the game, since if you want the 20 rings, you may have to wait a second or two before going back into battle, potentially leaving your team to fight without you. Shields are also a gameplay item in Marvel Rivals that can be substituted with bubble shields from the Sonic games. So if you're granted shield by an ability or an item pack, it will manifest itself as a bubble shield that surrounds your character, giving the game more of that Sonic feel. I also think that elemental shields can also be included. There are 3 main elemental shields in Sonic, that being the Flame Shield, the Thunder Shield, and the Aqua Shield. The way the shields would work is that they would protect you from damage, but if the shield is damaged beyond its threshold, it disappears, just like in Marvel Rivals. With Elemental Shields though, you can choose its ability to sacrifice the extra health that it gives you. So for example, you can use the Thunder Shield for an extra jump, after which the shield disappears. The Flame Shield will boost you forward for attack damage or mobility, and the Aqua Shield will bounce you high up, to which you can continue to attack during your descent. Certain abilities that characters have also deal these 3 types of elemental damage, and if you have the right shield equipped, the damage will be completely negated. So for example, if you have a Flame Shield and Blaze the Cat launches fireballs at you, you'll be able to absorb all of that damage with no effect to your shield. This puts even more strategy into the game, since if you're going up against a team that deals primarily aqua damage, you'll want to look for shields that can adequately protect you from those attacks. Now that we got all of the adaptation stuff out of the way, we can finally get into the meat of the video where I talk about all of the characters' abilities. I do want to preface that most of the abilities that I've come up with are very inspired from Sonic Heroes and Sonic Chronicles. That being, they both have characters that are sorted into 3 character types. Both have a plethora of different characters to choose from. Both have characters that use moves that transcend into different media, and so on. Sonic Heroes even has hero in the name. A Sonic Hero shooter, if you would. Alright, so without further ado, here are all of the abilities of the Duelists of Sonic Rivals. So let's start off the abilities section with our titular boy, Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog is easily going to be a duelist. His standard melee attack will be Flash Fury, where he releases a flurry of punches and kicks in a 5-hit combo. Sonic has no projectile attacks, so we'll move over to his abilities. His first ability is the homing attack. While airborne, Sonic can use a homing attack to chain together attacks on enemies with a limit of 3. While charged, it can lock on to up to 3 enemies, to which each is hit once. He'll also have a mobility move called Mach Speed, where he goes into a state of speed to move at much quicker rates. While in this state, Sonic's next ability can be triggered called the Spin Dash, where he curls up into a ball and barrels through enemies, dealing damage and knockup. For his final ability, Sonic can perform a tornado spin that carries his momentum and inflicts damage and knockup. I can see skilled players using his speed to charge at an enemy and perform a tornado spin to throw enemies out of bounds. Moving to his passives, Sonic's passive is that he can run up and along walls indefinitely. Since he is the star of the franchise, he'll have a lot of team up potential, so it balances out his rather limited kit. Sonic will have team up abilities with Knuckles and Tails called Team Sonic, where Tails can grab onto Sonic and launch him at enemies to ricochet off of them, dealing thunder damage, just like Thunder Shoot in Sonic Heroes. Knuckles will be able to carry Sonic as well to launch him into the ground, dealing knockback and flame damage. His other team-up ability I'll talk about after his ultimate. Speaking of which, his ultimate ability will be Super Sonic, transforming him into his super form, dealing damage to all opponents within his radius, much like Solok or Storm's ultimate. If Sonic is damaged beyond his threshold, he won't be KO'd, but he'll revert back to normal Sonic with full health. Going back to Sonic's final team-up, he has team-ups with Shadow and Silver called Past, Present, and Future. This allows Sonic to share the power of the 7 Chaos Emeralds with them to transform them into their super forms by sacrificing their own fully charged ults. This increases the radius, damage output, and duration of Sonic's ult. Sonic will be an essential duelist backliner, and his moveset will make him a 3-star difficulty hero. And now that Sonic is finished, I present to you Sonic's MVP screen. Next is my favorite character of the series, Shadow the Hedgehog. Shadow's melee attack is a 3-hit combo. If used in the air, Shadow will perform a spin kick. Shadow will use all of his Chaos abilities, using Chaos Spear as his main projectile attack. His passives and abilities go hand in hand, so let's talk about them both. Shadow will have a unique gameplay style where he has extremely long cooldowns for his abilities, where the cooldowns act as gauges that you need to fill in order to release his abilities. If you're a fan of Shadow the Hedgehog 05, you know where I'm going with this. Before seeing these abilities, let's touch on Shadow's final passive. Shadow also has passive mobility, where he can use his air shoes after running for a short time for enhanced speed, exactly like Luna Snow. So now moving on to his abilities, if Shadow uses his Chaos Spear for assists and basic damage, his hero gauge will fill up, allowing him to use his first ability called Chaos Snap. Chaos Snap allows Shadow to teleport directly to enemies with a kick combo. On the other hand, damaging structures or using Chaos Spear for final hit KOs would fill up his Dark gauge to use his final ability called Chaos Blast. This deals area of effect damage to the surrounding enemies for devastating damage. Shadow's ultimate will be called Ultimate Life Form Unlimited, where Shadow takes off his limiter rings, giving a significant boost to his base abilities, such as auto locks for Chaos Spears and increased radii for Chaos Blasts. Shadow will have a gauge that depletes quickly over time and with each use of his abilities. When the gauge is depleted, Shadow will revert back to his normal form, but for each KO, the gauge will reset. If the gauge is at or over 80%, Shadow can choose to sacrifice the remaining amount of energy in his gauge to use Chaos Control to freeze time for enemies for a short amount of time. But like I said, this will automatically revert Shadow out of his ultimate form. Shadow's team-up abilities are with Rouge and Omega called Team Dark, where they can also combine their ultimates. During this, Shadow uses Chaos Control and is rendered immobile, leaving Omega to spin with his Omega Beam Cannon, while Rouge spins with Omega, healing allies within her sights. Shadow's kit is complex enough to where he would be a 4-star difficulty hero, where you need precision in order to reduce your cooldowns. I can see Shadow being most efficient as a midline attacker, but backlining whenever his Chaos Snap ability is available. With that being said, there's only one thing left to do. I present to you Shadow's MVP screen. Before moving on, I want to say thank you guys so much for clicking on the video to begin with. This video took so much time. I had to come up with all of the abilities. I had to make every single ability card by hand with a very frustrating editing tool. So it took a lot of time, as well as the MVP screens. So if you're enjoying the video, please leave a like on the video. That tells the algorithm that people actually want to see what I'm putting out, and I can make more videos in the future. And if you like what you see, definitely hit the subscribe button. I will be making the videos for the Strategists and the Vanguards very soon, so subscribe so you don't miss out. Now back to the video. Next is Espio the Chameleon, and luckily for me, this is a hard clone of a Marvel Rivals character. Espio would play exactly like Psylocke. Espio's melee attack would be called Shinobi Slash, where he uses his blade to deal a single strike to enemies. Espio can shoot out shurikens that have a wide bloom to damage players and reduce cooldowns of his abilities. Speaking of abilities, his first ability is Shinobi Strike, dashing forward with his blade, launching a large shuriken in the process that bounces off walls, inflicting damage to anyone in its path. That's not in his ability card, but I kinda just thought of that now, and I thought it would be a cool callback to his Sonic heroes. He can also turn completely invisible with Chameleon Camouflage, boosting his speed significantly. Espio can also use sticky kunais that attach onto enemies and can be called to other enemies or return back to Espio, dealing damage. This also isn't in his ability card, but I'm gonna say that Espio can pull himself with a rope to wherever his sticky kunais land, which is a neat callback to the mission in Sonic Generations. Espio's passive is Nimble Ninjutsu, in which his footsteps are completely silent whether he's invisible or not. Espio teams up with Rouge and Whisper with an ability called Masters of Stealth, in which Espio grants Rouge and Whisper the ability to cloak themselves for a short time. Espio's ultimate ability is called Ultimate Ninja Power, where Espio takes out his dual-wield katanas and goes around dealing massive damage to enemies. Espio's kit, much like Psylocke's, requires constant poke damage, and the ability to take strategic angles to damage enemies within a close range. He is best used to target the enemy's backline strategists and duelists, as well as take on frontline tanks. Having great aim is absolutely critical for Espio, making this our first 5-star difficulty hero. With all of his abilities out of the way, I present to you Espio's MVP screen. Next is Metal Sonic. Metal Sonic will act somewhat like Iron Man, but not entirely. Metal's melee attack is called Metal Mutilate, where he dishes out vicious swipes from his sharp claws. His projectile attack sees him firing energy blasts from his hands, dealing area of effect damage. Switching over to his abilities, Metal Sonic is equipped with his black shield from Sonic Adventure 2 that makes him invulnerable but renders him unable to attack, much like Namor's bubble. Metal Sonic will also have the ability to fly at high speeds for 10 seconds before needing to cool down, and can choose to press the button again for a spin attack like Sonic CD or Generations. Metal Sonic's final ability sees him throwing down the Metal Virus from the IDW comics that can deal anti-heal and spread to enemies that contact each other. While Metal Sonic lacks the missiles that Iron Man has, Metal Sonic has the passive ability to analyze data by hovering the reticle over an enemy. When the gauge is full, Metal Sonic will have reduced damage dealt to himself from that enemy and will last indefinitely and can stack, meaning that he can copy all 6 of his enemies in a single match, but will reset when KO'd. Now here's where the fun begins. Metal Sonic is unique in that his gameplay is progressive. His ultimate ability transforms him into Neo Metal, an enhanced state that moderately increases damage output and maximum health by 50. If Neo Metal is damaged beyond his threshold, he will revert back to his base form. However, if Neo Metal successfully charges up another ultimate, he can transform into Metal Overlord, dealing incredible damage with missiles and broken airship parts, and also has the ability to shoot crystals that render enemies immobile. At the end of Metal Overlord, Metal Sonic is reverted back to his base form. This means that survivability is key for Metal Sonic, and if you're KO'd, you will have to regain 2 ultimate charges in order to unleash Metal Overlord, making him a 5-star difficulty villain. With Metal Sonic's abilities complete, I present to you his simple but effective MVP screen. Emerl is next to get his kit. Emerl is a fierce prototype to the ultimate life form, so he's going to be a duelist. With the ability to copy other abilities, Emerl makes for an unorthodox duelist, as we'll see when we get to his abilities. To start though, his basic melee attack is an energy swipe that hits enemies in a single strike. Emerl's projectile attacks come in 3 variations. His first is Charge, a projectile that does aqua damage. His second is Static Beam that deals thunder damage, and his final projectile is Sela Slash that deals flame damage. It's important to note that elemental damage is not extra damage, it just means that base damage can be absorbed by its respective elemental shields. Now we get to what makes Emerl so unique. Emerl only has one ability called Data Copy. This ability allows a player to target an enemy or ally and assign his own unique kit, so no one match as Emerl is ever the same. However, the caveat is that Vanguard and Strategist abilities are reduced in effectiveness by 50%, but the Duelist abilities will still be at full power. Emerl's passive ability is Combat Analysis, in which if you hover over any one enemy for a certain time, any negative status effect that can be dealt by that enemy will not have any effect on Emerl. This, however, cannot be stacked and can only be limited to one player. Moving to his ultimate, Emerl copies a targeted ally or enemy to copy their ultimate ability that is always at 100% effectiveness no matter what category the character is in. Emerl requires knowledge of all other kits, as well as knowledge on which button assignments make for the easiest use, making Emerl a 5-star difficulty hero. With Emerl finished, let's take a look at one of my favorite MVP screens. Next on our roster for Duelists is Blaze the Cat. With the power of fire, she is a fierce warrior and a princess with a duty to protect the Soul Emeralds. Blaze's normal melee attack will be a barrage of fiery kicks called Cinder Strike, a play to her original concept name. Her projectile attack would be Fireball, in which she launches fire projectiles at enemies to deal flame damage. Moving to her abilities, Blaze can leap in an acrobatic arc called Dancing Flame. If a player is caught in the arc, they are dealt flame damage and knockback. Blaze can also enter an enhanced speed state like Sonic called Burst Dash that envelops her in a fiery tornado. While in this state, Blaze scorches the ground that she moves over, leaving a continuous line on the ground that can draw a shape. If a shape is drawn, the area within is lit up and deals flame damage to enemies within. Blaze's final ability is called Scorched Soulfire, in which she can cleanse her body with fire, negating all negative status effects and granting her a flame shield. Moving to her passive abilities, Blaze has the passive ability of flame damage immunity, as well as a slow descent with her fire propulsion. Blaze would have team-ups with Silver and Sonic, in which she grants them both flaming hearts, cosmetically looking like the flame from Secret Rings. Whenever Silver blocks damage or Sonic damages opponents, the flame on their chests grow. Once at full strength, attacks are infused with extra fire damage and they are granted flame shields. Finally, Blaze's ultimate is Burning Blaze, as she harnesses the power of all 7 Soul Emeralds. She leaps into the air and throws down cataclysmic fire tornadoes onto the field, that draw in enemies and deals massive damage. Blaze is a great duelist who can throw enemies off by how agile she is, disrupting mid and back lines. By using her dancing flame to escape sticky situations, Blaze is most effective by disorganizing enemy lines while dealing massive and continuous damage to enemy vanguards. Blaze's kit makes her a 3-star difficulty hero. With Blaze finished, we can wrap up her character with her MVP screen. Next up to receive a kit is Fang the Sniper, or Fang the Warrior, or Knack the Weasel, you get it. Fang the Sniper is going into the Duelist category, as most of his gameplay abilities stem from his pop gun. We're going to use our imaginations here and take the name Fang the Sniper and fully lean into it, making him equipped with a long-range pop gun sniper that can deal massive damage to enemies. So for his projectile attacks, he has his standard pop gun called Pop Shot that deals moderate damage and is less effective at longer ranges. However, he can aim down sight with his sniper scope to visualize enemies from a great distance and snipe enemies for massive hit scan damage. His standard melee attack called Pistol Whip has him bashing enemies with a single strike of his gun. Moving to Fang's abilities, he can use Lasso to rope an enemy up and move to them, striking with the kick up at the end to deal damage and knockup. Next is a mobility ability called Marvelous Queen, where he can use his iconic vehicle for enhanced movement. If he jumps while using Marvelous Queen, he is propelled even higher. For his final ability, he can use a drill on the Marvelous Queen that slams into the ground, grounding all enemies in the radius for a short time. Fang's passive ability is his Spring Hop that gives him a higher jump than all other characters. Fang has team-ups with Bark and Bean called Team Hooligan, in which they can ride on the Marvelous Queen. Fang's ultimate is the Fang Robo from Superstars, but don't worry, his ultimate doesn't last nearly as long as that boss fight does. It's crucial that Fang players have great aim and can consistently land headshots. However, since Fang is best used as an off-angle duelist, he barely missed the 5-star rating, leaving him as a 4-star villain. This completes Fang's ability card, so let's watch one of my favorite MVP screens. Bean the Dynamite is next up. Bean's heavy use of explosives makes him a duelist. Bean's normal projectile attack has him throwing bombs that deal small area of effect damage at quick rates, much like Jeff's normal attack. For his melee attack, he can peck at enemies in a 3-hit combo. Switching to his abilities, Bean has the ability to throw an Aqua Explosion that floods a small area of the battlefield, dealing Aqua damage and movement debuff for those in the flooded area. Bean's next ability is Dynamite Charge, where he sets explosive charges in unexpected areas, like around corners or nestled into ceilings, that fall onto enemies and explode once in proximity. Bean's next ability sees him building a mini bomb factory that constantly spawns bombs that automatically walk towards enemies, dealing significant damage. For Bean's final ability, he can throw a sticky bomb at an enemy. If an enemy has a sticky bomb attached to them and they come into contact with another enemy, that bomb stays on the original target and duplicates into another. Sticky bomb can duplicate up to 6 times, one for each enemy, so it's best used in pinch points. Bean also has a passive ability in which he can fly in a straight line during a fall. Bean has a team up with Bark that I like to call Chillin' Out, in which Bean can hop onto Bark's shoulders, infusing his normal attacks with ice that can deal aqua damage and freeze enemies in place if he lands multiple successive hits. Bean's ultimate is Behemoth Bomb, which sees Bean throwing a giant bomb down onto the battlefield, dealing devastating damage to opponents in its radius. If an enemy is directly hit by the bomb, they will be instantly KO'd, even for Vanguards that are not blocking. Bean is a unique duelist in that his damage output depends solely on strategic bomb placements, making Bean a 4-star difficulty hero. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any sorts of clip for Bean, so I couldn't make an MVP screen, but not to worry, to make up for this, I made 2 MVP screens for our final duelist. But we have 3 more to cover until then, so let's move on to one of my favorite characters, Styx the Badger. Styx the Badger is up next. Styx is not durable and is not shown to have any abilities that coincide with healing or morale boosting, so she's going into the Duelist category. Styx is going to be an unlikely clone, as she'll share a lot of abilities with Moon Knight. And no, it's not because both of them are really paranoid, but I guess that does help the case a little bit. Styx's melee attack, unoriginally but appropriately called Styx's Styx, will have her doing a whirl with her staff to hit enemies. Her main projectile attack will be her crescent darts, which she throws, bouncing off of multiple targets. Moving to her abilities, she can also throw her wild boomerang as a heavy version of her darts, dealing damage and bouncing off enemies as well. She can place a forest totem that knocks enemies into the air and drags them towards the epicenter simultaneously. Both crescent darts and wild boomerangs can bounce off of the forest totem into enemies. Styx's final ability is her primitive spear, to which she throws down a spear that lodges into the ground, dealing damage to whoever is hit, but remaining on the battlefield. If Styx is in the vicinity of one of her spears, she can perform a pole jump in which she vaults herself upwards. Styx also has the passive that I'm renaming Superstitious Sense, in which she can sense when an enemy is aiming at her. Styx has a team-up ability called Boom Buddies with Amy, Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails, which allows Styx to give them the ability to fling themselves with the primitive spears. Styx has 2 ultimates that she can choose from. Her first ultimate is Booby Trapped, in which a targeted radius is selected. Once selected, Styx lays down a gauntlet of hazards that deal tremendous damage per hit, and sleep dart traps that stun enemies for a short time. Her final ultimate is called I'm Telling You They're Real, in which Styx builds a bunker that allies can shelter in for small healing, as aliens come down and rain fire on the enemies. During this ultimate, you take control of the UFO, shooting laser blasts and using the tractor beam to grab onto enemies and can throw them out of bounds. Styx is an extremely useful duelist if you utilize her moveset properly, dealing incredible damage to enemy lines. Her kit lands her as a 3-star hero. With Styx moveset complete, let's finally watch her MVP screen. Jet the Hawk is up next. For his standard melee attack, Jet can perform a winged whack, where he uses his wings to hit enemies in a 3-hit combo. His main projectile attack is Feathered Fling, where he flings out his sharp wings from his body for damage. Jet is another very unique character, so let's skip over to his passive ability. Jet's gameplay revolves around his passive, in which he has an air meter that determines the effectiveness of his abilities. The more air in the tank when an ability is performed, the greater the effectiveness of that ability. All of Jet's abilities consume air, and if he runs out, he will switch to walking, and is limited to only his basic melee and projectile attacks. Jet can restore air by dealing damage, and also by using one of the abilities that he has that we'll get to later. Speaking of which, let's now get to the abilities. For his first ability, Jet performs his iconic Bashosim Dash, dealing heavy damage and inflicting confusion, which reverses the enemy's movement controls for a short time. Jet can also perform a Tornado Torrent by pressing both triggers at the same time, that places a tornado onto the battlefield that drags in enemies and deals damage in the radius. If enemies are pulled directly into the center, they are rendered immobile until the tornado disappears. Remember, the amount of air that you have in the tank determines how strong and wide the tornadoes are. Next is the Kick Dash, to where he consumes air for enhanced mobility that can last until the air meter is depleted if you choose. Performing this move leaves a trail of turbulence that allies can run along for enhanced mobility, and deals movement debuff for enemies that walk along it. Jet's final ability is Trick Out, where Jet can perform tricks on launch panels, dash rings, springs, and while falling, to gain back air. However, if you don't properly land your tricks, you only get a small fraction of the air that you would have gotten. I know I didn't create Wave and Storm as characters, and maybe I will in a part 4, but Jet will have team-ups with them anyways, cause duh. Jet grants Wave and Storm 20% increased effectiveness on their air meters. Jet's ultimate ability is the Magic Carpet, in which Jet rides the Babylonian treasure that has unlimited air, negating all cooldowns and maxing out every ability to if they were performed at 100% air capacity. With the aid of his Type J extreme gear, Jet can go headfirst into battles and use his extreme maneuverability to disrupt enemy lines. Jet has a reliable kit that works effectively at both long range and close range, however is limited by the air gauge, meaning you'll have to strategically ration your air, making him a 4-star difficulty hero. There's only 2 more characters left, so let's watch Jet's MVP screen before moving on. Tangle the Lemur is the penultimate duelist on our list. She is one of the most popular characters in the IDW series, and would be a great way to introduce players who haven't read the comics to her character. Since Tangle's means of fighting are limited to her tail, she lands herself as a duelist as well, acting as a clone to Spider-Man. Tangle's melee attack is a tail tap, to where she releases a punch kick tail combo. Tangle's range attack, called tail tap, sees her stretching her long tail out to deal damage, and enemies hit are marked for yoink, which is one of her abilities that we'll get to soon, but I think you know where we're going with this. Tangle can perform a tail swing, where she latches onto structures and swings across great distances. Tangle can entangle enemies with her tail, rendering them immobile. If she presses the button again, she can lift them up to the air and slam them back to the ground. Tangle can also use Lemur Leap to hop on her tail for an extra jump. Finally, her most useful ability is Yoink, to where she can reel in enemies. If Tangle uses Yoink when an enemy is marked, she will zip to the enemy instead. Tangle's passive allows her to use her tail to stick to a wall or hang from a ceiling, but she can't move once she's attached. Tangle has a team up with Sonic and Blaze, which she can use her tail to create a border to slingshot Sonic or Blaze in a high speed attack that damages enemies within its radius. Tangle's ultimate is called Tangle and Strangle, and when she lifts all enemies up in front of her into the air, simultaneously she squeezes them, dealing small amounts of damage over 4 seconds, and then slamming them back into the ground, dealing a final hit. Tangle's massive kit makes her another 5-star difficulty hero. With Tangle complete, we only have one more character left. But before that, let's watch her MVP screen, which was animated by Avechian Galetis and scored by Low Boulder. So thank you to both amazing artists, and credits are in the description. For our final duelist, we have Surge the Tenrec. Beginning with her attacks, her melee attack is called Grounded Pound, where she uses her spike gauntlets to bash enemies. Surge has her normal projectile attack called Surge Bolt that sends out projectile lightning blasts that deal thunder damage. Moving to her abilities, her first ability is called Negative Like Electrons. This ability causes her to enter an enhanced state in which any enemies within her range are periodically struck by lightning. It also increases her and her allies' damage output slightly. Surge also has Zip Zapped, which is the ability to instantly zip to another teammate using her electric powers. Zipping to an ally grants her and the ally a thunder shield, as well as reducing the allies' cooldown slightly. Surge can place Electro Field on the battlefield, dealing thunder damage to all within its radius. If the enemy lingers in this field for too long, they are electrocuted, stunning them for a short time. Surge's passive is called Hyper Go-On Absorption, in which she can negate any wisp powers that are placed onto the battlefield. If you're watching only the Duelist video, it'll make sense when we get to these Strategists. I didn't write it on her card, but she's also immune to thunder damage. Surge has team-up abilities with Jet the Hawk, Shadow the Hedgehog, and Metal Sonic called Sonic Rivals, in which Surge shares her electricity, infusing their abilities with extra but small thunder damage. Surge's ultimate ability is Dynamo Cage, in which Surge equips the power-boosting Dynamo Cage, giving her the ability to create large electromagnetic fields and lightning blasts that deal significant damage. Surge is an excellent team member for her damage buff to her allies and hard counter to Whisper's variable Wispin. She is best utilized as a midline or frontline attacker, granting her teammates damage boosts and dealing passive damage in every enhanced state. She can also retreat to the backlines if necessary. Surge's Powerhouse Kit makes her a 1-star difficulty villain. And just like that, all of the Duelists are complete. So to end the characters section, let's watch 2 of Surge's MVP screens. So there you have it, those are all of my ideas for Sonic Rivals. Again, like I said, the Strategists and the Vanguard videos will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, so definitely subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that. If you liked the video, definitely leave a like. I poured so much effort into this and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And definitely comment on the characters that you want to see get an ability card and an MVP screen. All of your guys' comments and support really get me through the editing process, and I really appreciate it, so thank you very much. But we have reached the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for 222 subscribers. My name is Japes, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.